This is the magicwordpodcast.com.
Hello, this is Scott Wells for the magicwordpodcast.com. This week's episode is sponsored by the Friends of the Magic Word. Those are the ones who help us financially with their monthly pledges and with their ongoing donations from time to time. Thank you guys very much for your assistance, and that's what we really need in order to help us keep going, because we've had some issues in the past with not just with COVID, but also some economic downturns in which some people have had to reduce or eliminate their financial support. And so I thank you for those who are continuing to support us, and those new people such as Jay Gorham, who we are welcoming this week as the newest member of the Friends of the Magic Word. Thank you, Jay, and welcome. We hope you enjoy and continue listening to the Magic Word podcast. This is, of course, free to anyone who wants to listen, but for those of you who might have the financial ability, let's say, to at least pay for a cup of coffee a month, or perhaps if you have a little bit more means, perhaps it might be the equivalent of a nice glass of single malt. Whatever it is, your financial assistance will be greatly appreciated. Well, this week we are going to be talking with Randy Wakeman, who was a magician a long time ago, working in the Chicago magic bars and different places, having worked with Jim Molinari and some other people in days gone by when Chicago magic bars were kind of in their heyday. And at the time, he was also writing some books that he had written. First one was Special Effects, along with John Mendoza, and then also had one which is called Randy Wakeman Presents, which is still currently a top seller for him. And some other things he's put together as well, some other books, and does some lectures and workshops at magic conventions, attending Abbott's and a few other conventions from time to time. And I happened to run into him actually, first of all, at the senior tour, which was in St. Louis just this year. And he was just preparing to give a workshop. So it was before the doors opened, and we had a chance to talk, because I was just thinking I will get a little content here for our daily updates for the convention. And as it went on, I realized that really there's a lot more here I'd like to talk about. So I decided that when we got together later in the year, we went to Fechter's Finger Flicking Frolic, or the 4F convention in Buffalo, we'd sit down and chat some more. So this was kind of cobbled together, if you will, between those two particular conversations. So the first part of this conversation was recorded in Buffalo, which actually was the second part of our conversation, and then we pick up in St. Louis, which was the first part of our conversation, and then return at the very end back to Buffalo again. So there's a lot of time travel involved there, as well as actual travel as between Buffalo and St. Louis. Anyhow, I know you're going to enjoy it, and I thank Randy very much for his time, not just once, but twice, and sitting down to give us his thoughts on his philosophy of magic, and also just getting to know him a little bit better. It was always a lot of fun. So please welcome my guest this week, Mr. Randy Wakeman, here on The Magic Word. I'm here today with Randy Wakeman, who is a magician extraordinaire, someone who has produced his own books, worked with a lot of other magicians then as well. In a way, I kind of say an underground magician, and we'll talk a little bit about that then too, but also someone who's been working in Chicago and is familiar with the Chicago magic scene from the standpoint of going way back to some of the early days with the magic bars, and someone who I think said even spent some time with Ed Marlowe.
I did.
From time to time. And so please welcome my guest right here, Mr. Randy Wakeman. Hey there, Randy.
Hi, Scott. How are you?
I'm fantastic.
You look great. You look multicolored. I mean, you are the master of all magical media.
There I am.
A magical media mogul, I think.
Well, some people call me the Podfather, so there you go.
Is that a good thing?
That's a good thing, I think, as well, yes. So I can give you an offer that you shouldn't refuse when you're listening to these podcasts all the time. So I appreciate you coming. And so I mentioned Ed Marlowe. When did you first kind of get within his sphere? I mean, did you just kind of, were you invited, or you were at a restaurant then one day? When
Eddie had the table. It was known as the table, the round table, and they met every Saturday. at the Palladian, which became the Three Bears, and then Carmen, right next to Magic Incorporated.
Okay.
Magic Incorporated is 5082 North Lincoln. So the table, everybody was welcome, was essentially every Saturday. So if you want to meet Ed Marlowe, you just drive down and say, "Hi, Ed."
But you were a young kid at the time, and you'd heard about the guy, or did he kind of surprise you, or how did that?
Well, I was certainly familiar with the Cardition, revolutionary card technique, but I started working behind the bar with Heba Haba Al, north side of Chicago, at the Pickle Barrel when I was a little bit underage.
Okay.
16 years old. But so by the time I was, let's say, 18 years old, I mean 17, 18, I'd been doing bar magic in Chicago for some time. And prior to that, I did magic.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the first close-up magician I ever saw that was just terrific, in my view, was Jim Ryan. Now, Jim Ryan was working at the Ivanhoe. They had the Catacombs. It's really a cool place. The regular magician was the fabulous Frank Everhart. So it was Frank Everhart's Magic Bar. And on Sundays, it was Jim Ryan.
I see. Okay.
So I had a friend, also a magician, who said, "You got to see Jim Ryan. You got to see Jim Ryan." And I didn't have a driver's license. I was maybe 14 years old. And so I went to see Jim Ryan, and it was fantastic.
Changed your life.
People just loved him, and people screamed. And they didn't scream because they were scared. I mean, they screamed because they loved it.
Yeah, surprise.
Yeah, and he was just a fabulous entertainer, performer, and
Why is it?
that was the first magician I mean, stage magician, sure, but the first close-up magician I ever saw that I thought was just absolutely terrific.
He's someone who I think is lesser known than other magicians, obviously Vernon and some others. I mean, he's not...
Oh, Jim Ryan?
Jim Ryan, exactly. Although he was the first person who was the guest of honor, I believe, at the 4F convention, even before Eddie Fector, I believe. Or he might have been number 2. But he was a guest of honor.
Yeah, he used to come here.
Way
to
back
Fector's,
here. Yeah. What was it? I say it impressed you. Obviously, it was just his card work, or a little bit of coins, or was his personality, presentation? Was he bombastic?
It's really always the person. I mean, I think it's always the person. Well, there's Eddie Fector. I mean, it wasn't just the magic. It was Eddie Fector, the person. And the same thing with Heba Haba Al Andrucci. Jim Ryan, he's just friendly, boisterous voice. I mean, he ran his own saloon for many, many years. He and his wife Kitty, and that's how he made a living.
Right.
You know, Ryan's Saloon with the player piano. I said, "Oh, Randy, if you ever start a saloon, you got to have a player piano." That was his tip for me, and I still resisted the urge. I do not have a player piano.
Still.
But Jim was a great guy, and I loved watching him. He essentially did the entire book, Card Magic of Paul LaPaul, by Paul Braden. He could do the entire book. Yeah. That and the Val Evans Card Rise and his Cups and Balls. I mean, that's how he made his living.
Made it, yeah.
And he was referred to as the darling of the Geritol set. He was not a young man then, but he was very, very good. And he did a lot of hospitality work and trade shows later on in life because he was just really a strong performer.
Just one of the original corporate magicians, I guess, in a way.
Well,
like Eddie Tulloch.
He came into it later in life because he was running his own saloon.
Did he finally close that and then pursue magic? I say pursue that. I mean, the other...
He did a lot of things. I mean, he taught magic. He was very involved. All the meetings. He taught a course at the St. Patrick High School on Belmont Avenue, and I graduated from that. I still have the diploma. I mean, I took that. That was 1971, I believe. 1971, and it was before I could drive. So, at where I was living, Joliet, to get to Chicago, it was a way. I always found a way to get up there.
Yeah.
And that was terrific. And that was like every Tuesday night. And
for how many weeks?
Ooh.
Like 6 months or something? Or?
No. I'd have to check the diploma.
Yeah.
I'm thinking 12
okay.
12 lessons, something like that.
Yeah.
And he would do basic stuff, but if you got there early, or stayed late, he would
give you a private lesson, kind of.
Yeah, something a little more advanced, a little more something you could work on and show him next week. But and we became good friends. But Jim was fantastic. He was just a great performer.
And when you work with Heba Haba Al, the thing, of course, he was most famous. What he was most famous for was the sugar cube.
Excessive lubrication, like you're demonstrating right here. We have to keep you moist in warm weather. We don't want you to dry out, Scott.
No, that's true. I don't think I will. But he was known for the sugar cube, right where he would have he'd put some graphite pencil on a cube or something and transfer it into.
That was a signature trick. The sugar cube. I mean, and a lot of little bits. He had a routine where he's stealing money from the cash register. Looking around, just a lot of bits that would involve the entire bar. I mean, he's one guy that could just work the entire horseshoe-shaped bar, just a one-man whirlwind, and pour a lot of drinks. I mean, he was a bartender magician, bartender first. So it was GTF.
GTF, right?
Yeah,
right.
About right. So it was but
GTFM actually, yeah.
GTFM.
Yeah.
But he was. It was the type of place people would come in, and they would stop off for a beer, and they'd end up staying the whole night. It was just so great.
Yeah. He was called Heba Haba Al because that was his magic word. Is that right? Say Heba.
It came from Hubba Hubba, which was a term for
a good-looking girl when you see
hot mama.
Yeah, okay.
Da 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 da. Yeah, an attractive girl. That was even my dad used that phrase. Really good-looking girl. You just like, ooh, Hubba Hubba.
Yeah.
So it was Hubba Hubba, and then it morphed into Heba Haba.
Which he used, I guess, when he would do cups and balls or anything when a magic was supposed to happen, he would utter that phrase.
Well, that was just he was Heba Haba Al. No, he didn't say that.
Oh, he didn't say it. Okay, that was just something.
Not all the time.
Instead of saying Andruzzi, it was easier, I guess, to have that memorable name. But
yeah, it was just Heba Haba Al.
Yeah, and you said you were working at the Ivanhoe as well.
No, I never worked at the Ivanhoe.
Oh,
that was
the Pickle Barrel. You said
that was the Pickle Barrel with Heba Haba at Howard and Western, Pickle Barrel North.
Okay, but you worked there with him at the Pickle Barrel.
I did.
Yeah, for how many years or how long was that?
Oh, a couple of years. I could drive, so I was 16.
At least 16.
And I was certainly shouldn't have been in there. I was underage.
Sure.
But I didn't drink. I mean, but I was behind the bar.
Right.
And Al loved it because he got tired of doing the bloody stuff. He used to always joke. He's like, when I was your age, I couldn't wait to get the cards out. Now I can't wait to put them away. And people would laugh.
Yeah.
And he meant it. He just couldn't wait to put them away because
Yeah.
he'd done it for so long.
Right. When you were working, how did the Chicago style of magic come about? I mean, there had already been something, and I say that because the Chicago style, as I understand it, is sitting at tables, as opposed to when you're doing walk around standing at a table, which I do in most kind of situations.
Pretty much sitting on a bar stool. You're familiar with the technique, right?
Yes, yeah.
Well, Chicago, part of it was Matt Schulian, and Matt Schulian influenced a lot of people. So the old Schulians and the new Schulians, the New York Lounge, it was Jack Murray, I believe, who founded the original New York Lounge, and then it was moved to right there on Lincoln Avenue, right up from Magic Inc. And Heba Haba, he'd been at it for a long time.
And Eddie Fechter was in Chicago for a while. Is that right?
Not that I'm aware of.
No, okay. But he had come through because he was part of the round table, I thought, wasn't he, or not?
No.
No, okay. No. I thought for some reason
Ed Marlowe knew Eddie Fechter.
Yeah.
They got together. They worked some conventions together. But, no, Eddie Fechter was busy making a living
here in New York
at the Forks Hotel,
right,
which was his home.
Oh, he lived at the Forks also upstairs.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Sure. So it's a big deal if Eddie Fechter invited you to come to the table, which he did. I met Eddie Fechter before I ever came to the convention, and I was invited into the kitchen to sit at the table.
Yeah.
Well, that was his kitchen table. That's where he ate
all of his meals.
Well,
yeah,
right. Himself
yeah.
and Evelyn.
Right.
That was their home. So.
Well, and that was what's great about back in the Forks on Friday night fish fry, that everybody would go through the kitchen and be served the fish right there in the kitchen.
Fry. Yeah, because originally this convention, it was only a day and a half, right? So it started free pop and beer, or included pop and beer. Eddie just wanted to have a party and have people that love magic together, and there was full of laymen, of course. So a lot of people came in just to enjoy the magic.
Right.
And there was no extra fee or anything, just come on in. So it was packed.
Right.
And, the convention just started Friday afternoon, and it went through Saturday night, and that was it originally.
Right, right. I started this off by talking about underground magicians, and I know that Roger Klaus and a few other people have been termed as underground magicians. And there's some guys who really are, who are not as well known, that really are some great workers. I've always thought of Gary Plants as being somebody like that, who is very unassuming and creates some really strong magic.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Gary Plants has worked hard at it for many, many years, and
it's only now that he's retired from teaching that he's really performing magic and going on cruise ships and doing some things, so that way he's doing it more for the public, because he really wasn't doing public shows. I just think he enjoyed working with magicians and hanging out with
I think he still does.
Well, of course he does, yes, yeah. But would you say that's kind of what you have done? I mean, when I said an underground magician, do you consider yourself as an underground magician or not? Or
no, not at all.
Not at all?
No, not at all.
What do you consider yourself? Would you say a worker, a professional, a hobbyist?
Just a regular guy that does a couple cool things, that's all.
That.
Because I started doing magic very early. I did blue and gold banquets. I mean, I did stage. I did a lot of blue and gold banquet shows, and we're talking about 10, 11 years old. And prior to that, I read everything I could from the library, mail order stuff, Johnson Smith Company. I bought my Svengali deck. I was 7 or 8 years old, Kankakee County Fair. So, no, I enjoyed performing it.
Yeah.
And I gave shows.
Yeah.
For money as a very young man.
Yeah.
And of course, through high school, and that's how I got my spending money in college, was sorority parties and frat parties.
Right.
And some local television.
Right.
So yeah, I mean it's.
So yeah, obviously that you were doing things professionally. I mean, at the Pickleball Barrel and other places, like you
Mr.
say.
C's Magic Lounge from the time it opened with Jimmy Cars, Jimmy Molinari.
Molinari, yeah.
Right. They're in Berwyn.
And then Bill Malone. Then later, you said.
Yeah, I mean, I worked at the New York Lounge on and off, and Houdini's Pub.
That was owned by Bill. He had the Houdinis, is that right? Or
it was owned by Tom and Barb Balsowich.
Okay.
And Tom and Barb. Tom had a factory job at Panduit, and Barb was always very smart. And she had ran a travel agency called Magic Travel right up the street, and they bought, they would come into Mr. C's, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, big Bill Malone fans and big Magic fans in general, and they wanted to open up a Magic. Well, it was a restaurant. I mean, pizza, sandwiches. They had tables and a small stage and close up. So it was actually Tom and Barb that bought the place and renovated it and named it Houdini's Pub.
When I talked with Robin Leach, who is the host of Lifestyles, the Rich and Famous, and I was talking with him about the evolution of magic in Las Vegas and everything. But I was asking him also about magic in general, and he said, "You want to know who my favorite magician is? It's Bill Malone." He said, "I've hired him to do private parties in different places." He said, "I just think he's the best." Bill's just really a great guy. Also, especially
with champagne kisses and when caviar dreams come true. Right, you got to have Bill.
That's right, and he does. But in later years, then, and I say later, like the last, let's say, 15, 20 years, you'd written the book. What's the title of the book again?
I've written several books.
I know, but the one I was thinking of that was what was your first book?
Formula One Close-Up.
Formula One, that was it.
Right.
Okay.
With special effects and Randy Wakeman Presents, Rainbow Deck Book. And various, magazine contributions.
Right.
And a whole slew of VHS videos and
Right.
DVDs.
And have you, it seems popular nowadays, a lot of people doing penguin lectures and things. You've done a penguin lecture, I believe, too.
No.
Didn't you? Haven't done one of those yet? Okay.
No.
Okay.
I've been asked several times, and it's like, why would I want to do that?
Because you've already got your own DVDs and other ways of putting it out yourself rather than marketing it through a third
No,
party.
Tim Trono comes like, yeah, you ready to do a penguin lecture? It's like, what do you call me? I mean, are you just out of people? Are you desperate? What's going on here? But no, I mean, it's fine if you want to do that. I mean, if you're starting out and you want to get some street cred and you want to make a name for yourself in the magic community, I mean, it's not going to help you with trade show work or
Right.
hospitality suite work. But if that's what you want to do, if you've got product that you want to market, sure, it's great.
Right.
But
right.
I mean, for me, no, not so great.
You've kind of got everything out there that you want then right now, and you've lectured.
I mean, the penguin deal is not a good deal for me at all. First class transportation to
Fair enough.
to where,
Yeah.
And it's. I think this is fair. It's set up where whatever you're paid, you'll never see another dime. You're supposed to get royalties, percentage of the profits and all that stuff. You'll never see another dime. It's like, oh, we'll fly you down and take you out to dinner. And we'll get you, beautiful room, suite, and all that stuff.
Right.
That's an expense. So you're paying for it. So before you can see a nickel of royalties, I mean, all the stuff that they're paying for you, that's cost.
Yeah, that's true. And that's time away
and
from...
whoever's doing, where Dan Harlan or whatever, everybody's got to be paid, and they should be.
Sure.
So, I mean, for me, no, it's just not.
It's
not a good deal, but for other people, it is. So, I mean, they're not doing anything wrong. I don't want my remarks to be construed as like it's a dig or,
right.
We've got adults that decide that, it's mutually beneficial, and then you do it. And if you don't want to do it, don't do it.
It's the same way with on television, like America's Got Talent or Penn and Teller Fool Us. What is your reason for wanting to do that? You want to get notoriety? Do you want to get butts in the seat because you have a theater? You have to realize.
Have you ever read the America's Got Talent contract?
I have seen it, yes.
Yeah, okay. So it's just whatever you do,
They
all
own it.
theirs.
Yeah.
I mean, all the outtakes, flubs.
And they can do anything they want with it.
If you say something naughty backstage, it's on they own it all. And
they can use it any way they want and put you in any light they want.
Yeah. And I think essentially in perpetuity. I mean, you give up any and all rights to whatever happens during the competition. But it still worked out great for some people, but for very few.
Right. Well, it wasn't until recent years, speaking of America's Got Talent, before magicians really kind of came into their own, where they started appreciating us more.
Yeah, where you have, where a magician can win America's Got Talent.
Yeah.
It's like, who knew?
Right.
Because how do you compare a magic act to a gymnast or a 25 acrobats flying across the screen, or or singers, comedians? I mean, it's pretty difficult.
Right. Yeah, it is. Going back to the things that you've already done as far as the books and DVDs and whatnot, have you got new material that you're always working on? Have you got something kind of in the pipeline now that you're thinking about?
But there's no deadline on it.
No, that's a nice thing, too.
Yeah, I mean, there's no deadline. Nothing is coming out soon.
Imminent? Okay.
No.
When you have ideas, then, are you just putting them in the computer and then you kind of file those, or do you work on them, and where do you work on them? I mean, do you show some friends?
Notebooks and files, and, how many books do you want to put out?
Right.
Right? I mean, it's... I don't care. I'm not Ed Marlowe. I mean, it's not like there's going to be just this constant stream of material. I mean, that's not the point. If I put another book, it has to be better than Randy Wakeman Presents, and that was my best stuff, the stuff that I used night after night, and performed again and again and again.
And that was your most recent, wasn't it? Which was kind of like the best.
It was the hardbound book.
Kind of
the hardbound book. So, I mean, the reason to put out a book would be it's just got to have some really good magic in it. Not good ideas for magic, but stuff that is performable and gets a good reaction from audiences. And
well, I think that's what it's all about. Just like you were talking about Jim Ryan and Eddie Fector, from the standpoint that it's and Hebe Al, it's the personality, the presentation.
They were all just wonderful characters. That's something that's
characters.
Probably lost a little bit because we've had a lot of characters, eccentric, crazy, a bunch of everything in magic.
Right.
And some of the characters, the more flamboyant characters of years gone by, we just don't have that anymore.
Not like we did. That's true. And the few that we do have, let's say, I think Matt King has got a nice personality, but also he has a persona on stage, as well as Steve Bergazzi and a few people.
Matt King's terrific.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen his show. More often than not, when I'm in Vegas, I go see his show. I've not since he moved.
Oh yeah, over the Excalibur
from Harrah's. I haven't seen it, but yeah, Mac does a great job. People love him.
Sure, that's what I'm saying.
And he's been at it for a long time by now.
Oh, he has.
Very successful.
And when I was saying character, he has a character, but that's not the kind of character you're talking about. As far as being kind of a pistol, I guess would be the way of kind of putting it. When you talk about Eddie Fector or Jim Ryan, some of these guys, the way that they can kind of ride the line. Mike Hammer, that'd be a guy I would say probably is a character.
Mike Hammer? Mm-hmm. Stacy Keach you're talking about?
He works the Four Queens. Mike's got a great act. I think one of the best in showbiz out there. And the way that he handles the audiences, he's like the Don Rickles of magic, it seems like, where he has just this impish kind of a character. And that's why I say he does have, he is a character, because the word character has two kind of definitions.
Well, what I mean in a positive sense.
Well, of course. Yeah.
And, a person, ambiance, a performing style that's memorable.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that's what I mean. A memorable character.
Yeah. And something, that people are going to remember and that they like and they want to come back and see the person then again.
They don't want it to stop. Mm-hmm. They wish it would never stop. They're having such a great time. And when they leave, they just can't wait to come back and bring some friends. It's like, oh, you got to see this.
Yeah, that's right.
And that was, but Jim Ryan, Heba Haba. It wasn't. Magic was only part of it. It was the person, the same thing with Eddie Fector.
Right.
Okay, listeners, we're going to take a break here where we're going to stop talking about this particular subject and move on to another, only because this is beginning of our conversation that we had when we were in St. Louis. So here's Randy.
It's nice to have an event where people have a good time and not have a pile of unpaid bills that you need to deplete your savings account for.
But even the IBM and SAM, where the conventions are not making money like they used to, and I know the TAOM.
Attendance is down, but it's tough for live events all over. I mean, it's tough for JC's Lions Club. I think Moose. I think really
people are not joiners the way we used to.
Well, and COVID changed a lot of things.
I think prior to that, it was just kind of going down.
Killed the trade show industry. Yeah. It killed cruise ships. And there is inflation, so dollars don't go as far as they used to.
Did you do much stuff during COVID? Any Zoom shows or
no
teaching or anything? I mean, when I listened to Doug Kahn, who had embraced that, and he's got a whole new career with doing things on YouTube and social media and making a major part of his income from those kinds of things.
From exposure, you mean?
To people, that's another whole subject. Yeah, talk with Vinny and Glenn yesterday about that, but it's not. He doesn't see this.
I mentioned that just to be a bit
controversial.
No, just to be a bit frisky. Yeah, that's all. No, I mean that there's no resolution to that, and the. People have said that more magic is exposed by bad magicians than all the people that intentionally try to expose
Sure.
it. And we've had tricks in Cracker Jack boxes and cereal boxes and magic sets.
Right.
But, go buy a magic set or you can buy anything you want. on Amazon, and that's not exposure. But if someone does the video, it's exposure. I'm not buying that. I mean, it's magic dealers, magic masters, shops, souvenir shops that their clients are tourists.
Right.
I mean, they're not there for serious magicians. I think if it was the so-called serious magicians, there wouldn't be any magic shops at all.
Yeah.
So you rely on a healthy base of amateurs, people that have interest in magic, or at least some interest in magic, for magic shops to survive.
Yeah. Yeah.
And whether it's Matt King does a great job, terrific performer, very successful performer out in Vegas, doing it for a long time. Mm-hmm. Matt King has the Matt King magic set. He has all his goodies and trinkets, but so did Penn and Teller. Right? There's a Penn and Teller magic kit.
Well, Lance Burton did. I mean, everybody did.
Sure.
Yeah,
so people, I think, get cranked up. Mm-hmm. I mean, just because in Chicago years ago, they had trick and treat with the magic hands, which teach tricks. Mm-hmm. They would do the trick, and then they come back and give you the explanation. It was, a little lecture thing on Garfield Goose, WGN Channel 9. Uh-huh. And people didn't get cranked up about it. Now, some people did get their noses bent out of shape with Marshall Brodeen and TV magic cards. And, hi, let me show you a trick that's even more amazing. But, there have been Svengali. I was 8 or 9 years old when I bought my first Svengali deck at the Kankakee County Fair. It was $2, which was my cash, for the weekend of the fair because I'm a kid. But I was fascinated with it, and I bought a Svengali deck. So Pitchman and
that's what got you started in magic.
Well, I was always fascinated with it on TV, but my first magical purchase was Svengali deck.
When it got into your hands, then it's like, hey, this is kind of cool.
Sure, I ordered things from Johnson Smith Company, and of course, read everything I could at the library, everything about magic, and saw all the magic I could. And if there was a magician that I could get to, I would go see him.
Yeah,
and it's great. I mean, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah,
and you can have a great time with magic. I guess there is one thing that I'd like to say that is to me important. You can have a great time with magic, and you don't have to be a full-time professional magician. I mean, it's a great icebreaker. It's great in sales. It's great with clients. It's
motivational speakers or teachers or people also to try to get attention for the groups.
Sure. No, if it's interesting, intriguing, and amazing, it's good for anybody that's working with clients, working with salesmen, customers. I mean, it sets you apart, but people have fun with it.
Yeah.
For example, Heba Haba Al. The first time I worked behind the bar was working for Heba Haba Al.
Wow.
A little bit underage at the time, there at Howard and Western. Well, Heba Haba was terrific, but he was a bartender magician. So his job was a bartender. I mean, he wasn't a magician bartender or a magician at a bar. He was there to, GTFM, you've heard the phrase?
Yeah. Doc Eason uses that a lot.
What's that?
I said Doc Eason uses that phrase a lot.
Well, that's Heba Haba, but I mean, if you can't move any drinks, there's no bar, there's no income. The bartenders aren't getting paid. Waitresses aren't getting paid. So what's...
Did you work at other clubs also? Because there was a period of time in which there were... Chicago was a hotbed of magic bars.
Absolutely it was, yes. So I worked at... I worked with Heba Haba at the Pickle Barrel at Howard and Western.
That was the cross street, Howard and Western, or was that the name of it? Okay.
Yeah, that's
where the Pickle Barrel was.
That's Howard and Western. That's the location. And I worked at Mr. C's Magic Lounge in Berwyn. From the time it opened for Hugh Cosgrove and his partner Denny Aloya. Jimmy Molinari and I worked there from the day it opened to the day it closed. And worked on and off New York Lounge and later on Houdini's Pub with Bill Malone.
Did you ever work over at Shulian's?
No. I did not.
Okay.
No, Schulians normally had their one house magician. So it was Don Allen at one time, but it was Chuck Morris for a while. Later in life, Heba Haba worked at Schulians.
There was another guy, by the way, that his name's Chuck. It just occurred to me. He died many years ago. I can't remember his name, but he was in Chicago. Did Close Up. Does that name ring a bell?
A good dead
Chicago he
magician?
died of AIDS. One of the early people who died of AIDS.
Oh, yes, I do remember that because AIDS was a new thing back then. It was Chuck Stanfield.
Stanfield, that was who it was.
Chuck Stanfield, who worked at Magic Incorporated, and they had he did have AIDS, and Jay Marshall said, well, to celebrate his life, let's have a magic show. So they had a big magic show. For Chuck, and Chuck performed. I mean, he was getting pretty sickly at the time, and it was. I was there. It was a good event.
Yeah, I recall also, speaking of another one, that there was supposed to be some sort of a tribute to Jay Marshall when he had passed, and I think Max Maven and Penn and Teller had come out for that. Were you part of that?
No,
you know what I'm talking about?
No, I knew Jay very, very well.
Yeah, you probably got some great stories about him too.
Well, yeah, I have a few.
Lay one on me.
I have a few. No, Jay was a lot of fun. He had a great sense of humor, but he also had kind of a nasty side to him. So he could really jab people when he wanted to. So he had an impish sense of humor.
Yeah.
But how well did you know Jay? I mean, that's just he had a mean streak in him.
Mm-hmm. He was always nice to me. I remember one night, I was there to say at night. It was actually close to closing for Magic Inc. And he said, well, let's go to dinner. And we went over, I want to say, the New York Lounge, and saw some magician, come to our table and work. But he was just, when I've been around him at IBM conventions, other places, he was always nice, but always had some sort of a gag or something funny or a funny story to tell and things, And he took me back and showed me a little labyrinth.
He could be brutal. Bob Reed was in town, and Bill Malone was working a few of the clubs. So Bill has always been a good worker, but he had the big afro and he had horrible teeth, broken teeth and green. I mean, really, really nasty. And Bob Reed was there, and Jay Marshall brought a big, huge mirror. He says, you know what your problem is? Take a look.
He held a mirror right in front of him.
Yep. And Bill was ticked about it, but of course Jay was right because...
That's what people see whenever that they're looking at you.
The first thing they see are your teeth. And here's a guy with broken teeth, green teeth, and it's just he doesn't care, and got his teeth fixed.
As a result of that? I mean,
absolutely. As a direct result of that. I mean, Jay embarrassed him, but it was kind of like tough love because it helped out Bill's career.
Yeah. I remember also that Frances, for a while, lived there. She had a cot, I guess, downstairs behind the counter at Magic Inc. Do you remember that? Frances Marshall living there? Yes, no?
Well, they both lived there.
Well, I know, but I mean, I remember when...
That was home.
Yeah, but they had upstairs where they would go, but I guess as she got more ill, she didn't go upstairs, and I think she stayed downstairs.
Jay really did a good job taking care of Frances, but she had dementia, and she was down the street at the Swedish Covenant home. So she was in a care facility, and at that time, it was very expensive, and Jay didn't have the money to cover it. So it was at that time that he sold his poster collection and a goodly portion of his collection to David Copperfield. But David Copperfield didn't take it right away. He was only going to take possession of it upon Jay Marshall's death. So it worked out good because Jay had plenty of money to take care of Frances, no more financial worries. Frances was being taken care of well. Jay wasn't stressed out about funds, and David Copperfield eventually would get the collection, and that's exactly what happened.
And so Jay got to keep his collection until he was gone. So it wasn't like he was missing it; it's still there.
No, it was all his until he checked out. So it was a very clear-eyed decision. It was great.
That was another amazing thing. Whenever I went back and looked at those catacombs, I call them, where they had those posters all rolled up and everything. It was just, I felt like I was down in the pits of Rome.
You're going back. Of course, you're going back prior to Magic Inc. You're going back to when it was Ireland's.
Oh.
Laurie Ireland. Mm-hmm. That's obviously Francis's first husband. And he passed, and then
Jay Murator.
That's it.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, there's a lot of history there, and but Jay, he did have a bit of a wicked sense of humor. But he really loved magic. He brought a lot of people in. He worked very hard to bring people in for his hardcore lecture group. And it was $5 a lecture to be a hardcore member. It's like $5, and then the lectures are $5. And he would work hard at bringing people in from all over the place.
There was a story he had told once, and I'm going to have you complete this if you remember this, about some peanuts that he had beside his table, and he was offering some peanuts, and he said, well, they're not chocolate-covered peanuts, but they used to be.
I have no idea.
Okay, know what I'm talking about? Where he was... where he was offering he'd take some peanuts, and he was saying, well, they used to be chocolate-covered peanuts, but I sucked the chocolate off, and so now they're just peanuts. They spit back.
I've heard the gag, but I've never heard.
Okay, I didn't know that was a real story. It was just a gag. Okay, that's so funny.
But and people would come in town, and of course Jay performed a lot. I think it was. How many appearances on Ed Sullivan? So he was really a New York guy.
Did he tour with the troops also and go to USO shows and that kind of a thing? Do you know?
I don't know exactly. He certainly did a lot of work in England. Yeah. He knew a lot of British magicians, and he would bring over people that you wouldn't normally see, and he would get local gigs and shows for them, book a church, book a hall down the street, advertise it, and a lot of people would show up, like Jeffrey Buckingham. I don't know if you ever met Jeffrey Buckingham. You ever watch him work?
Yeah, I did. He was actually, I think, a past president, he was past president of the British Ring of Magicians, I believe.
That could be.
I think he may have even been the past international president of the IBM. I'm not sure, but yes, I have.
No, there are a lot of great folks. Ali Bongo, of course.
Pat Page.
Pat Page was fabulous. Very underrated, I think.
Well, when you say underrated, I mean he's rated high, and if you think that still is underrated, even higher.
Rated a lot higher, because he just had a great mind and a great sense of magic, and there was some politics involved.
That's too bad.
Over a book that he published.
Which book was that?
The big book that was considered an expose because it was exposure, because it was available. It was published, sold to the general public, not just through magic shops.
Oh, I was
so
thinking the big book.
You could get it, at your normal Barnes and Noble or the equivalent.
Right.
And he got kicked out of the Magic Circle for that.
Because there were too many good secrets in there, not just
because
like general.
Because it was sold to the public.
Yeah.
But I don't remember that Henry Hay got chastised.
Well, David Devant got kicked out, and then they brought him back.
Okay.
So I'm surprised it didn't.
Scarni on card tricks? I mean, look at all the Dover publications.
Did Patrick ever come back, or was he?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought that he had.
Yeah, they realized they were being British twits. Yeah, I mean, it's like he's given so much to magic. It's like, but you still have to read it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not being foisted on anybody.
That's true.
So, it was teaching. It wasn't, this is how it's done.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's true, and that kind of goes back to talking about exposure and magic. If you trip across something, it's like, well, I wasn't planning on watching it. For an example, whenever they had The Masked Magician, I remember my daughter-in-law was at the time dating my son, and she was working as a waitress in a sports bar, and there was the Masked Magician that came on, and there were some guys watching. She went up and changed the channel, saying, hey, my future father-in-law is a magician, said, you guys shouldn't be watching this as exposure. He said, this is sports bar. You should be watching sports anyhow. But, she was, the point is...
Penn and Teller were criticized for exposure.
They were. Remember, they were called the bad boys of magic.
Well, I think they called themselves the bad boys of magic just to make themselves a little more controversial because they're not really that bad.
Yeah. Well,
they're not bad boys, but they did do the cups and balls, the
plastic cups,
see-through tables and things like that. And I think they had everybody in the audience produce a silk with a thumb tip, and they did some stunts that people, oh my God, you can't do that.
Yeah, but in the early days, I recall that when they were working at the was that called the New York Lounge, or no, it wasn't the New York Lounge, it was something like that. That wasn't too far from the castle. And I went to see the show. I was working the castle then back in the early '80s, and went over to see them when they had Mofo, the mind reading or psychic gorilla, doing all that, and they were doing the Casey at the Bat with
sure,
all that.
No, every time they were in Chicago, they played the Blackstone Theater. I go and see them, and they were terrific years ago, and they're terrific today.
Yeah, they have really grown into it. But my point is,
they're fabulous.
Back then, I remember the controversy was when Bill Larson, of course, was running Genie Magazine. That was when he was saying, "Oh, this is bad for magic because they're exposing magic," and there might have been some publicity involved with that, in which they were trying to become the bad boys of magic.
Well, Bill Larson could say that. Martinis are bad for magic, and he proved it. Who am I? What am I doing here? Wow, Irene, how about another? So, I mean, but to sit in judgment or say that one thing is bad for magic,
well, all that I'm saying is
it's ridiculous.
If you kind of trip across something that you weren't going to be looking for anyhow, I mean, you can go down a rabbit hole again with YouTube, but in finding something that's going to be for the general public, I would think, But if you're going to be having something that's going to be a little bit more detailed, like Pat Page's book, perhaps, that shouldn't be open for the public. I just was talking with Elise D'Amatos, who has a great idea. In his book, the pages are folded such that the secret is in the fold. If you kind of get what I'm talking about, you actually have to rip the page open to open those two pages to see the secret inside. So in other words, it'd have the effect on one page, and the next page would have a picture of it or whatever. But the pages would be folded, and then the other loose ends essentially are bound into the binding. So if you want to see the secret and learn that, you actually have to rip open that to get to the secret.
I don't think good magic can really be exposed.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever seen Teller's routine, the ball and the string?
Oh, sure. Yes. Brilliant.
Well, and what is it?
A ball and a string.
Yeah. But it's mind-blowing and it's beautiful.
It is nice.
Right? So, I mean, so expose that.
Well, now, we're getting into something. This is interesting. Again, going back to Elise D'Amatos, in which he was talking about we need to learn, share, and collaborate, meaning that our art has not moved forward in 10,000 years, or however far back it first started.
It's enduring.
It is enduring, but what has changed? Basically nothing, as opposed to, in his example, let's say cinema, that was invented, as he says, like yesterday, in comparison with magic. So it came about in the late 1800s, and the way that it has evolved from silent films to talkies, from black and white to color, and the better quality, not only of the images, but also the sound. And look how that has grown because people have shared and learned and collaborated with each other. Whereas we magicians keep secrets, thinking the secret is the secret, when really the presentation is secret. I mean, what Matt King is doing something that perhaps any magicians can be doing, theoretically, but it's only him. You're buying Matt King.
It's not about the secret. I mean, it's about entertainment.
Precisely my point.
I mean, people are. It's not fun to be fooled. It's not fun to be made a fool of.
Right.
That thing. It's not. But to feel wow, to be amazed, to be surprised in a magical way, that's great. Now, Penn and Teller, how many years have they been doing Penn and Teller Fool Us?
For 10 years.
Right? Very successful. Very simple set, and well received when they first did it. I think it was in the UK, but it's a long running thing, and people enjoy it. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't call that an exposure show at all.
It's not. No, because they're not explaining secrets or how things are done. I like the verbiage that Penn uses that is very cleverly, I don't know if it's scripted, but it's very well said.
No,
so he's not having
Penn's good at that.
Yeah. He really is.
He would say, I mean, does Harlan Tarbell ring a bell, or... you
doesn't really want to mention
the Bremen nut or whatever reference he would make. No, it's very good.
Yeah, because it's not something
he does a great
that
job.
people can go back then and Google. So if he would say a name of a trick, then he knows that they can go and Google it and figure it out. But if he says something that's more discreet, then it's harder to figure out what the magician
the book
understands.
and the page number. I mean, he'll just make a reference to so and so, and it's enough to.
Yeah.
People can say, well, yes or no. And,
Yeah.
no, he does it very, he does it elegantly. I have to give him credit.
Yeah, no, he does a good job.
I mean,
and that's why.
And really.
So there's no exposure there,
No, it's entertainment. It's all for fun.
Right.
And the premise is good.
Well, the ratings obviously are proving that it's successful because, again, 10 years.
Yeah, it's good for magic. And you're giving a lot of people exposure that they would never, where else are they going to get that type of exposure?
You're not. And I would think that's something, again, like America's Got Talent, people have to go on there thinking this is something that I'm going to put butts in the seats or I've got something I want to sell. I mean, there's a reason why you want to do that. I would think it's because of the promotion that you can get out of that to try to book other shows.
I think Penn and Teller really do a lot for magic.
Yeah.
I really do. Mm-hmm. Now that I think of it, I think they're underrated in that regard.
Yeah, they have really done
because
a lot
they've
for
been at
magic.
for a long time. I mean, they certainly don't need to work. I mean, we're well beyond this. They just love magic.
Yeah.
And they love experimenting and improving. And
well, they found a nice niche, and I think that's great. And again, I started over in the UK, and to think that is something that has been one of the very few shows that's come over and been successful in the US, having originated there.
But yeah, I mean, I've seen the show at the Rio, and it's generally sold out. I think it's always sold out, and they do a great job. Everybody has a good time, and I think they get better all the time, particularly Penn. I think Penn has really matured in all the good ways that a performer can mature. He's very good. Mm-hmm. He writes a lot. You know, he writes a lot about tech, and he has all kinds of books, as does Teller. But just as a performer, he really gets good. I mean, he used to be kind of the chubby, hairy, the hippie thing, and he's more of a gentleman on stage than a lot of people. Mm-hmm. So he handles himself real well, and Teller's always been excellent. I mean,
well, we were talking about
a couple of the best we have.
In talking about some of the people that we have mentioned then already, is there someone that's more of a favorite, someone that you not only think maybe is underrated, but maybe someone who is not as well known, or maybe an underground magician, or someone that you respect, or who's one of your favorite magicians?
None.
You're your own.
No. Sadly, a lot of them have left us. We had interviews about Eddie Marlowe, mm-hmm. Because Andy Gladwin's putting out the magazines apparently, mm-hmm. and Josh J. But, it's not really healthy to compare everything to everything.
You can't. Everyone's a little different. You mentioned Heba Haba Al for an example. He was different than Matt Schulian. I mean, everyone's got their own style.
Wildly different. Heba Haba Al was probably the best there ever was in his environment. Hustling the bar. I mean, he was a one-man whirlwind. In his environment, really? He was fantastic.
I only saw him once, and it wasn't in his environment. I actually saw him at a magic convention.
Okay, that would be rare. I mean, he used to work for the White Sox in spring training. They'd bring him in. So, I mean, he was popular. He did a lot of work, outside of the bar. But in his environment, he was just absolutely terrific. One guy that can hustle a bar and just turn everything into a party and keep everybody entertained. And with some of the little skits, fabulous. But that was his environment. And, of course, that environment isn't all that common these days.
It's not, and there really aren't any bars like that. I mean, in Chicago, there's Chicago Magic Lounge, but that's really more of a club, I guess. Like,
yes, yeah, and I've not been up there, sadly. Shame on me, but no, I mean, we had magic bars all over the place. We had Mr. C's, we had a little bit of magic. Izzy Rizzy's, Ivanhoe for a time. Yeah, with Frank Everhart and Jim Ryan. This is the first time I saw really good close-up magic was at the Ivanhoe was Jim Ryan.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Did Jim Ryan do some trade shows also?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, I was thinking he was kind of known for that.
Well, he ran a saloon. It was Ryan's Saloon that he performed magic at for years and years and years. He loved magic, and he lectured, and he was the darling of the Geritol set, and he certainly did do a lot of corporate work in his later years at the Palmer House and McCormick Place.
Yeah.
I mean, he did do a lot of trade show work.
Speaking of the Geritol set, that reminds me of someone who actually, who's the guy that had all the electronic and magnetic stuff in the table?
That's the way I would describe it. You said Del Rey.
Del Rey.
Del Rey was fantastic.
Yeah. There was a guy, and it seems like he had worked for the mob or something way back when. Or he had some connections to that. You've ever heard that?
More than I do. No.
Okay, well,
I don't know anything about that. No, Del Rey was always a good worker. He was a great...
He worked for Blackstone Senior for a while.
He was a great sleight-of-hand artist, and he'd show up at the table and say hello to Marlowe. But Jack Pyle, Ed Marlowe, they all had tremendous respect for Del Rey. Mm-hmm. But when you talk about the table, it's like he was a good worker without the table. Sure. I mean, I've seen him work, and he was good. Uh-huh. He was the real deal.
Yeah.
So Del Rey was very, very good. Certainly
he was one of a kind. I don't know anybody else who has done that before nor since. I mean, he had something that was well before its time, you know.
I would say, and certainly it's been duplicated. You know, the table's been duplicated, but you can't duplicate Del Rey.
You can't duplicate, and that kind of gets to my earlier point of saying that you can buy magic and do magic, but it's the person, it's the personality, and the performance that is really that makes the magic. So that's why we maybe shouldn't be so secretive of our secrets.
Well, I wouldn't be paranoid about it. I mean, because if you don't have a sincere interest in it, it's like you'll turn the page.
Yeah. Well, that's true. That's true.
Right? Go watch the next Iron Man or Marvel Comics thing. You have to have an interest. Mm-hmm. So you could go out and you could mail out, Harry Lorraine's left us recently, Close-Up Card Magic.
Yeah. Great book there, man. That was
absolutely. And anybody that studies close-up card magic can do entertaining card magic for people.
That particular book, I think, would be in my 5-foot bookshelf.
But what if you mailed out a copy of Close-Up Card Magic to everybody in the United States? Do you think there would be more magicians? I would say no. Not one. Mm-hmm. So you have to have an interest. Mm-hmm. And then you have to go out and perform and get feedback, and you just have to have a feeling for the thing.
Well, you do. You do have to have that.
Otherwise, it's not important to you. And if it is important to you, then you'll presumably come to magic conventions. You love magic. You like to see old friends, meet new friends. But presumably, one of the main reasons is to become a better magician.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right?
Well,
even if it's just a bit or a line or maybe a handling that you can use to improve what you already do. That's part of the journey.
But it's not going to break you out of your shell. Well, take that back. It could break you out of a shell because there are a lot of young kids who get involved because they can do a trick and suddenly...
That's another bad thing with the title because you don't see too many younger people here, and I don't mean teenagers. Yeah. I mean you don't see too many people here in their 20s and 30s, and there should be.
Yeah. But I'm just saying that with younger people, they can find magic as something because they may not be good at sports or whatever else, and then they find magic as being something that they can do, and suddenly they are the life, not just of the party, but also they have the respect of their peers all of a sudden.
Well, you can be good at sports and
magic, too.
And do magic.
True, too.
No, that's the old caricature, right? Well, because this is Revenge of the Nerds. This is the nerdy kid who is afraid to talk to anybody, so he does the appearing cane.
Yeah.
But that's not the case.
You mentioned Simon Lovell briefly then earlier, and I do want to ask about that.
You mentioned him extensively earlier.
I did before we started into this conversation
have you spoken
here.
to my buddy Simon lately?
I have not spoken to Simon for years. I was talking with Lee Hathaway recently, and Lee apparently talks with him on some sort of pretty regular basis. To the point, he said like pretty much every night I'm talking with him, and he said, Simon, I'm going to have to go. Maybe we can not do tomorrow night. Because I think he just needs to have someone that needs to talk to.
Roger Nico was over there, and we would see Simon, when he's at the Circle or whatever.
Well, he's Bath's a long way from London. I mean, I don't think that he goes in all the time to the Circle, but I think he goes in regular.
Known to travel.
Yes, I think he has. But from what I understand, though, is that Simon's really more of an acrophobe, or becoming more helm-bound. Although he still talks a lot and seems to be very sentient, and so I'm hoping that Lee
I
can.
feel the same way about you, Scott. I mean, you're very sentient, and you certainly talk a lot.
Well, I get out though too.
Yeah, you do.
That's the difference. But from what Lee was telling me, that perhaps he might be able to get me in touch with Simon some evening or someday we can get him on Zoom.
Well, you like to talk. He likes to talk. So I don't. Yeah. What's the barrier? You can enjoy talking with each other.
He has gotten to the point where he is talking more, and also because he was doing a lot of decoupage. You're familiar with that, right?
A bit.
Did he ever give you any of his works of art?
No.
Okay.
No. I knew he was interested in it. Spoke about it. He was busy working on his decoupage with his dad, Tony, but. I'm not familiar.
But you were responsible for helping him get from...
Not responsible for decoupage.
For moving from the U.S. over to the U.K., didn't you?
In part, yeah. In part, yeah. I've only done, in my life, I think 2 GoFundMes. Mm-hmm. And Simon was the first. And, got to move back home and socialize medicine and got him the best care
he really needed.
He had, and his dad, as far as I know, sees him every day.
Well, he was not getting the care over here that he really needed, and so he did need to get back home. And I just think that you should be recognized for something of being so good. I know, but but thank you. On behalf of everyone.
I mean, it's not, friends are friends. Simon is a good friend, regardless. Sure. We're just friends, when you're just. Yeah. Friends for the duration.
But you haven't talked to him, and I'm assuming, in a while either, have you?
No, not for a while. Yeah. No, I haven't.
Well, hopefully we can...
I was talking with Roger Nico, and Simon was there. He was shooting a game of pool, and he says, "Well, Simon's shooting a game of pool." He's in the middle of his game. He's like, "Yeah, I'll talk to you later." So it was something like that. So he was having a beer and shooting a game of pool.
Well, he did have a live show he was doing, and you paid, I don't know, $20 or something, in which he was teaching some tricks. And I want to say Lee might have been the one, or someone else who was working with him, and that's, I think, available. You can still go back and buy. And he seemed like the old Simon, then again, the way he was sitting there and the interaction and the phrasing and everything. I mean, it seems, and this was, I want to say, certainly pre-COVID. This may have been like 2018, 2017. It's been a while back. Does that ring a bell with you? Do you remember when that event happened?
Yes.
Okay. Were you involved with that at all?
No.
Okay, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, I do.
Okay. Well, if you got nothing to say about that, then let's move on to something else.
No, I don't have a lot to say about it. I hope he's. I think he's safe and.
Well, he was instrumental. I think he's done a lot for the community as well. I mean, the books and the things that he has influenced a lot of magicians and gotten them interested in.
Very talented guy.
Yeah.
Great MC.
Mm-hmm. Very clever. Good writer. Done some TV shows.
Funny. Can do platform. Can do close up. I mean, can do stage. Yeah. Can lecture.
Did you ever go see a show? What was that? Wild and Wonderful Things or something? He had like a one-man show in New York for a little while.
Strange and Unusual Hobbies.
That was it. Yeah.
Yeah, a couple times.
Yeah,
of course.
How was that?
Good. Very good, actually. Very good.
So
it was an evening with Simon Lovell, and he did a good job.
I remember it was a smaller theater. I didn't see it, but he was telling me about this. And so was he doing close-up or stand-up or a lot of comedy or a little bit of everything?
Well, it was a small stage, and it was just an evening with Simon Lovell. And, yes, by nature there's comedy involved, but he did magic, and it was a good show.
Strange and Unusual Hobbies.
Strange and Unusual Hobbies.
Yeah, I don't think that was ever videoed, so no one can actually go back and see that. But it'd been nice.
I videotaped it, and you can go see it.
Is it on YouTube that you can watch, or sell a DVD?
You can get it from library.com, as a matter of fact.
Is that right?
Yeah, you can watch the whole thing.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
So
well, there you go. That is available then over there then too. So what is something that you're planning on doing then now, aside from coming up here shortly? We're going to be doing a workshop, but I mean, as far as long term, what are some of your long term plans? You're going to be writing another book or working on DVD or something? Or
no, I want to lose a few pounds, get my eyes done, and due for a colonoscopy.
Okay, so important stuff.
Maintenance.
This age.
It's actually the truth, but I'm doing fine.
Good.
But
good.
you know, the older you get, you need more doctoring and more preventative maintenance, and
nips and tucks.
Yeah, and I think I'm at that stage.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Well, yeah, many of us are. I certainly
But no,
feel it.
things are good. I have no complaints.
Yep. Anything new that you're working on? Some new card tricks? I mean, are you kind of refining some of your older things?
A little bit of both. Mm-hmm. I have enough for another book. I don't know if I want to put out another book or not because it would have to be. I'm very happy, really, after all these years with Randy Wakeman Presents because I've performed all that stuff.
Was that about 80, 90 pages?
It's more than that.
Yeah.
It's right there. You can read them one. Okay. I have to go because I am doing.
I know you are.
I'm doing a breakout session in a few minutes.
Well, I appreciate the time that you give me over here. So.
I appreciate you. Your perfectly groomed beard, your multicolored shirt, and it's just every time I see you, I feel like scampering through the lilac bushes. It's life affirming, Scott.
Please join me when
it's life affirming to see you.
Well, I tell you, before we close over here, I do want to ask you, the name of my podcast is called The Magic Word. So I always like to know what is the philosophy of my guest. What is your, I don't mean a word like hubba hubba, you know, I mean, what would be your philosophy of life? What is important to you?
Oh, nothing you haven't heard before. I mean, family and friends and, enjoy the journey.
Enjoy the journey. Yeah. I do hear family and friends a lot from people saying that's, keep your priorities. And your priorities should be your family and friends. And
it's a good way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And enjoy the journey. Again, good advice as well. Well, I appreciate it, Randy. That's great. Thanks very much for your comments. I appreciate it.
Okay. Good to see you, Scott.
So with Magic Word Podcast, that was Randy Wakeman. This is Scotty out. Thank you very much, Randy, for being my guest this week on the Magic Word Podcast. I appreciate you taking not only just the time when we were in St. Louis, but also the time later in Buffalo so we could sit down on two separate occasions. And, of course, our follow-up calls we've had in between. So the time that this has been recorded and the time it's been broadcast. So thank you for your time and your friendship. It's great to catch up, and I appreciate you giving all the advice that you did over here as well. Well, I want to start to wrap this up, but remind everybody, if you have not yet signed up for the pod letter, make sure you do that. Just go to themagicwordpodcast.com, and there you should see a pop-up that will allow you to subscribe. And I would appreciate if you can like, subscribe, and share this podcast with others to help our podcast grow. And if you have a few minutes, it would be extremely helpful if you could actually go to whatever podcast platform you use, whether it's iTunes or Google or wherever, and leave a 5-star comment telling us how much that you enjoy the show. For an example of one of the most recent comments that was left here in May, this was from Big Tom 213 that said, like listening to friends chat is the subject. And it says, each episode I listen to, I have preconceived notions of the directions this interview will take. And time after time, I'm wrong. Scott has immersed himself in magic and magicians his entire life. When he talks with someone he knows, the hour-long conversations go to levels I never knew. If he's with someone he doesn't particularly know, he finds a common bond or link, and then the sharing begins. Always intriguing and frequently enlightening. Scott's talks seem like chats among friends. 5 stars of enjoyable. Thank you, Big Tom 213. I appreciate your comment. And again, if you can perhaps just take a few moments of your time to go over and to leave a nice comment like that, and 5 stars, again, that helps our podcast grow. So, until next week, stay well, get booked, and remember to keep your priorities straight and then enjoy the journey. This is Scotty out.